we have a passage here. Now, this passage is a bit abstract. It requires a little bit of cautious reading because some kind of philosophy is involved, you see, in the entire argument. Actually, the writer is talking about the people who are known as the Maya of the classic period, who happened to live in southern Mexico and Central America between 250 and 900 CE. Now, I'll tell you the main points in the entire passage. The first paragraph, you see, it argues that human beings and non-human beings, you know the difference. Now, for the people of this Maya of the classic period, you see, they have a view of humanhood, personhood. And what is that view? That not only human beings are human, but non-human entities are also human. Non-human entities could be persons, like a stone, like what you call a tree. They can have the attributes of a person. And the main argument is these non-human entities are persons on their own. They are not persons because they are connected to human beings. You see, try to follow the argument. That is their view of person. So that is why he says that it is a very democratic way of understanding the world. You see, humans are not more important persons. The last line of the first paragraph, we are just one of many kinds of persons who inhabit. So that is what happens in the first paragraph, that he talks about non-human entities as being persons. In the second paragraph, he will tell you about, you see, what are the two basic criteria for personhood. In order to be named a person, in order to be named a human being, what are the basic criteria? And he talks about two criteria. The writer talks about two criteria, and the two criteria are: number one is human beings, persons, you see, are marked by personal requirements such as hunger, tiredness, physical closeness, etc. One is, of course, personal requirement, and the second criteria is community obligation, that is communication, interaction, ritual observance. You see, these are the two criteria, and the images, the coins, and other objects that the writer found there in the of that classic period depicted these things. You see, it depicted hunger, tiredness, physical closeness, communication, interaction. These things were, you see, depicted on the images. So it appears that in some of the images, it appeared as if the non-human entities were talking to the human entities. You see the images. So the point that he's trying to make here is that is the human and the non-human exist reciprocally and not interdependently. They don't depend on each other. The non-human entity doesn't depend upon the human being to draw its person. It is a person on its own. That's what he means to say here. The next thing he says in the last paragraph is personhood was a non-binary proposition. What do you mean by non-binary? When you say binary, it means either or. You see, you're a human being or you're not a human being. You are a man or you are a woman, right? So that is binary. The non-binary would be the non-entities, you see. They could be persons, whereas there could be something else also, right? There could be a tree, the non-entity. He gives you an example, you see, that a person tool is made of stone, or he gives you the example of the incense burner, which would have been made of clay and decorated with spiky appliques representing the sacred ceiba tree found in this region. So incense burner, you see, it could also represent a tree while being the incense burner. So that is the argument he has given in the entire what you call passage. It is actually, you see, Maya's view of person. Non-entities, they treat them as persons, and that personhood is, you see, drawn from its own existence. It doesn't depend upon human beings for its existence or for its status as person. That is the germ of the argument. Now let's come to the question. On the basis of the passage, which one of the following world views can be inferred to be closest to that of the classic Maya? One of the statements is very close to the view of Maya, you see. What is that? A tribe that perceives plants as person plants because they form an ecosystem and are marked by needs of nutrition. That is the answer. Why is that the answer? Because it fulfills the criteria you see that he has talked about in paragraph 2. The marked by needs of nutrition, that is hunger, tiredness, physical closeness. You see, even plants, they feel hungry. The tribe that perceives plants as person plant. They are treated as persons because they are within an ecosystem and are marked by the needs of nutrition. So number 1 is the correct option. Number 2 cannot be the correct option because it talks about survival and hunting weapons as sacred person artifacts. Number 3, a futuristic society that perceives robots to be persons. Well, he hasn't talked about robots and all these things here. A tribe that perceives its utensils as person utensils in the light of their functionality and bodily needs. The utensil, you see, doesn't talk about the bodily needs as such. Let's come to the next question. Which one of the following, if true, would not undermine? Would not undermine means would not weaken. You see, he says that which one of the following, if true, one of these statements is true, and it wouldn't undermine the democratizing potential of the classic Maya worldview. You see, if you remember, it's the last line of the first paragraph. It's a profoundly democratizing way of understanding the world. Humans are not more important persons. Let's see. While they believed in the personhood of objects and plants, they did not believe in the personhood of rivers and animals. That has not been stated there. So number 1 cannot be the answer. It doesn't anyway strengthen the argument, right? They depicted their human healers with physical attributes of local medicinal plants. Yes, this could be a point, you see, that the local healers, you see, they were equated. There was no hierarchy, you see, it was equated with the physical qualities of medicinal plants. And that is the answer. Number 2 is the answer. They believe that animals like cats and dogs that live in proximity to humans have a more clearly articulated personhood. The question of comparison does not arise. You see, the question of comparison does not arise being connected to the human or being away from the. They have their own independent existence. They understood the stone implement and the incense burner in a purely human form. No. So the correct option is number 2. Let's take the next one. In the next, what you call question, he says, which one of the following best explains the additional complexity that the example of the incense burner illustrates regarding personhood for the classic Maya, right? So, which one of these? You see, he talks about that additional complexity in the last paragraph, in the fourth line. One additional complexity. The incense burner, okay? The incense burner is categorized as a person, but also as a tree. So it is non-binary because he says with these Maya examples, we are challenged to discard the person, non-person binary that constitutes our basic ontological outlook. Which one of the following best explains the additional complexity that the example of the incense burner illustrates regarding personhood of the classic Maya? The example provides an exception to the non-binary understanding of personhood that the passage had hitherto established. No, that is not the point. The example adds a new layer to the non-binary understanding of the personhood by bringing in a third category that shares a dissimilar relation with the previous two. The third category is, of course, the tree, right? You must try to understand this. The third category is the tree. Now, if he brings in a third category that shares a dissimilar relation with the previous two, does it share a dissimilar relation, the tree with the incense burner? No, it shares a similar relationship because it is the incense burner or the tree. It is a similar relationship. Therefore, number 3, you see, is the correct option because number 3 talks about the similar relationship. The example complicates the non-binary understanding of personhood by bringing in sacred, establishing. No, it doesn't talk about these things, the profane and the divine. Now, let's look at the next question. Which one of the following, if true, about the classic Maya would invalidate the purpose of the iPhone example in the passage? Now, if you look at the first paragraph and in the fourth line, you have the example of the iPhone. Now, if you go through the paragraph very closely, you will find that the iPhone, you see, derives its importance from the human being, you see. It doesn't have a personhood. You are the owner. The person is the owner. And it draws its importance from the human being's use of it. Otherwise, you wouldn't pay attention. You should try to understand this point. What he's trying to make here is the purpose of the iPhone example in the passage, you see, would be invalidated. Why? The point is the iPhone draws its importance from being connected to the human being. Whereas in the Maya's view of things, you see, in order to be important for a non-entity, it's not necessary to be connected to a human being. It can have its own independent existence. Now let's look at the options here. Classic Maya songs represent both human and non-living objects as characters. We haven't talked about songs here, right? So that cannot be the answer. Unlike modern societies equipped with mobile phones, the classic Maya did not have any communicating objects. Now, that is absurd. We don't have anything of that sort. The personhood of the incense burner and the stone chopper was a function of their usefulness to humans. Now, if you say that the personhood of incense burner and the stone chopper was a function of their usefulness to the humans, you are connecting, you see, the burner, the incense burner, and the stone chopper to the human being. And if you do that, then it would definitely invalidate the purpose of the iPhone exam, because you are connecting it with the human being, which the Mayas don't do. So the correct option is number 3. Now we can come to the next passage. This is a wordy passage, wordy in the sense there's a lot of words and discussions going on, but we'll have to look at what you call the main points in the entire passage. It is all about tea, T-E-A-T, and a book, A Thirst for Empire, you see, talks about a detailed history of tea by the historian Erica Rappaport. So in the first paragraph, you have the evolution of tea, that how did it evolve from an obscure China drink to a universal beverage. And here the writer gives you a specific history of tea. Why? With a specific purpose, because this is not a chronological, you see, history. It is a history, you see, which has to do with the importance of tea. So that is what the first paragraph is about. Now, in the second paragraph, he will tell you, he or she will tell you, how did tea become popular? So in the 1700s, you had the temperance movement. The temperance movement is a movement, you see, you know what temperance is. Temperance is restraining yourself from alcohol, smoke, and other things. That is temperance. So the temperance movement, you see, they clamored, you see, they advocated people, they advocated for tea. They advised people to take tea instead of alcohol, because alcohol would land people into a state of inebriation, into a state of intoxication, whereas tea, you see, would leave you pleasant and cheerful. That is why they, you see, wanted to promote tea. And other industrialists and other people, you see, what they did was they started taking interest in what you call selling and buying tea. And then you had, you see, they wanted a sober workforce. Factory owners, you see, they wanted a sober workforce, and a sober workforce would do well if they took tea instead of alcohol, right? And moreover, even the Christian missionaries, you see, they found tea very soothing, right? And insofar, during the Second World War, you see, tea service was presented as a social and patriotic activity that uplifted soldiers and calmed refugees. So, soldiers and refugees, if they are offered tea, if they were offered tea, the refugees would possibly become calm and the soldiers would feel more patriotic. So now you see how the evolution of tea, the movement of tea, you see what has happened. You see, it was encouraged by industrialists, it was encouraged by the temperance committee. They started giving moral arguments for tea. The moral arguments was to give up alcohol. It leads you to intoxication. If you want to be sober, if you want to work hard, then you take tea. So they were that is the moral argument, you see. And then Christian missionaries coming up and clamoring for tea. So the soldiers usually being asked to take tea, the refugees being asked to take tea. That is how, you see, tea was promoted. In the third paragraph, you have what you call the marketing of tea. Marketing was tea. You don't have to go into all the details, but it was a consumer directed marketing. And there was a moral argument given, he has already talked about a moral argument in the second paragraph. In the third paragraph, he goes on with that argument, and he tells us that tea, sold by different brands, it came to denote a kind of patriotism. That is, most people, they started feeling anti-Chinese sentiments because they wanted their own tea, and Lipton was soon advertising from the garden to teacup. The point is, while tea marketing always presented direct consumer benefits, health, energy, relaxation, tea drinkers were also assured that they were participating in a large noble project that advanced the causes of family, nation, and civilization. So imagine, the marketing of tea was done on both what you call commercial and moral ground. The commercial grounds, of course, haven't been explained very clearly or in detail, but the moral grounds have been. Tea was linked to patriotism. Tea was linked to what you call familial affection, to national pride, to national what you call unity and civilization. Tea was, related to all these things. And there was an anti-feeling. There was a feeling of enmity towards China. So now you can understand what he means to say here, that it was a consumer-directed marketing, furthering the interest of family, nation, and civilization. In the next paragraph, then he talks about what you call Rappaport's treatment of a subject is refreshingly apolitical, right? What do you mean by apolitical? That is, it has nothing to do with politics. She wrote the history, and she wrote it in an unbiased, in an unprejudiced manner. And he points out that it was what you call, indeed, it is a virtue that readers will be unable to guess her political orientation. Both the miracle of markets and capitalism's dark underbelly are evident in Tea's complex story, as are the complicated effects of British colonialism. He says this is something that we are not to touch upon. We just consider that as apolitical. And then he comes back. Morality marking is now a commodity as well applied to food, fair trade, apparel, and eco-tourism. So in this last few lines, he is actually glorifying, uplifting tea. And of course, he had talked about morality marketing when he talked about, tea contributing to familial ties to nation and to civilization. He has all talked about that. It is a repeat here. See what he says. An astonishing success story in which tea marketers not only succeeded in conveying a sense of moral elevation to the consumer, but also arguably did advance the cause of civilization and community. So that is glorifying tea. In the last paragraph, of course, he says it is not a stretch to say that tea marketers had advanced the particularly noble cause of human dialogue and friendship. Socializing, sitting over a cup of tea and talking, right? Being conversational, being friendly. These are what you call the morality marketing, or what you call non-commercial methods of marketing tea, that it allows for friendship. Tea, invites friendship. Tea invites, affability, amicability. That is the point he wants to make here. We can now move on to the question. The author of this book review, because this passage is a book review of the book A Thirst for Empire by Erica Rappaport, and the author of this book review is least likely to support the view. That is, he would not support the view. Which view? Number one, the ritual of drinking tea promotes congeniality and camaraderie. Well, I think he will support this view. Tea drinking has become a social ritual worldwide. I think he will support that too. Tea became the leading drink in Britain in the 19th century. We don't have anything of that kind written in the passage, So number three is the correct option. Tea drinking was sometimes promoted as a patriotic duty. You have that in the second paragraph. Let's go to the next question. According to this book review, A Thirst for Empire says that In addition to profit-motivated marketers, tea drinking was promoted in Britain by all of the following except. Let's see. Factories to instill sobriety in their labor. You can have that in this. You have that in the second paragraph. Factory owners joined in compelled by the cause of a sober workforce. So you have that in the passage. Tea drinkers lobbying for product diversity. You don't have that. So number two is the correct option. That is an exception. Manufacturers who were pressing for duty-free imports, the anti-alcohol lobby as a substitute for the consumption of liquor. We don't have that cannot be the answer, you see. The next question, the book review argues that according to Rappaport, tea is unlike other morality products because it is unlike other morality products. Now, what do you mean by unlike other morality products? Do you mean to say that all products you see have some kind of morality? Let's see that. Number one, because it was marketed by a wide range of interest groups. I don't think that is the answer. It had an actual beneficial effect on social interaction and society in general. That is the answer. That is the reason. We see, unlike other morality products, it was different because it had an actual beneficial effect on social interaction and society in general. Number two is the answer. Was actively encouraged by interest groups in the government? No. Appeal to a universal group and not just to niche section of no. Let's come to the next question. Today, conflating consumption with virtue can be seen in the marketing of what? Conflating consumption with virtue. That is the idea of the morality, of goodness, you see, combining. You have the first sentence, the slates of hand that conflate consumption with virtue can be seen in the marketing of what? It can be seen only in the marketing of sustainably farmed foods. The others are incorrect. Travel to pristine destinations, natural health supplements, ergonomically designed products. No. Now let's come to the next passage here. In this passage, you see there are a lot of experiments that have been discussed. We can't possibly summarize those experiments, but we can summarize the main points, you see. The point is, he is talking about cuttlefish. And cuttlefish, he says, you see, they exercise, they exhibit, they show a lot of self-control. They show a lot of self-control. And when they are tested, you see, it comes out that self-control is thought to be the cornerstone of intelligence. When this man, you see, Snell, studied them and conducted marshmallow tests on them, he found that these cuttlefish, you see, they exhibit a lot of self-control. And he had trained them in a sense, he had conditioned them in a sense, and he makes use of triangles and squares and circular emblems and symbols to study their reactions of self-control, right? And these were done in controlled circumstances. So the second paragraph talks about these experiments. In the third paragraph, you have the point about the self-control and how this cuttlefish, you see, exercises self-control. When they were offered, you see, prawns, they were offered, you see, grass shrimp. He gives you in detail, you see, that some of them did not immediately jump upon them. The point that he makes here is, in the next paragraph is, he says that when you have what you call distractions, then because of distractions, you see, there can be self-control. So if you distract the cuttlefish from its bait, if you distract the cuttlefish from what it is going for, possibly then it exercises self-control. That is the point he's trying to make here. And in the next paragraph, he makes a point that animals which go for self-control, they have a long social life. But the cuttlefish, in spite of the fact that you see it exercises self-control, it is a isolated, solitary creature, right? It doesn't form relationships with even with its mates or the young. So it remains isolated in spite of the fact the experiments or the research showed that animals that exercise self-control, they have a long social life. But the scuttlefish is an exception there. So that is the whole thing in the paragraph, in the passage, I think. And that is actually talking about the detailed experiments. You see, the marshmallow test. We don't have to go through each and every line in that, right? Okay. Now let's come to the questions. Which one of the following, if true, would best complement the passage's finding? Cuttlefish wait longer than 100 seconds for the shrimp to draw to open up. That is an experiment. You can't take that as the supplement. Cuttlefish cannot distinguish between geometrical shapes. I'm sure this is not the point, because he has talked about three kinds of shape, and the cuttlefish was trained to understand them. Cuttlefish live in big groups that exhibit sociability. You see, this would possibly, supplement the passage's finding. Cuttlefish are equally fond of live grass, shrimp, and raw prawn. That is already stated. So the answer is number three. The next question, all of the following constitute a point of difference between the original and modified versions of the marshmallow test, except that, okay, the original and the modified, except that the former correlated self-control and future success, while the latter correlated self-control and the survival advantage. The former was performed over a longer time span than the latter. No. The former used verbal communication with no. I mean, the correct option is number one. That is, the former correlated self-control. That is the original, the original version of the marshmallow test, it correlated self-control with future success, while the modified, correlated self-control with survival advantages. The next question, in which of one of the following scenarios would the cuttlefish's behavior demonstrate self-control? The experiments that were done on the research. So let us look at it. Live grass shrimp are released while the two raw prawns drawers labeled with a circle and triangle respectively are placed in front of the cuttlefish. The triangle labeled drawer is opened after 50 seconds. No. Asian shore crabs and raw prawns are simultaneously released while a live grass shrimp drawer labeled with a triangle is placed in front of the cuttlefish to be opened after 1 minute. Yes, this is the answer, because this is an experiment to to demonstrate its self-control. And if you look at the passage, you can see that the cuttlefish is very fond of the grass shrimp, live grass shrimp, you see. So you shows the self-control. Raw prawns are released while a few, no. So the correct option is number two. And the last question here, which one of the following cannot be inferred from Alexandria's experiments? Yes, cannot be inferred. Intelligence in a species is impossible without sociability. No, I think conflicts intelligence and self-control. So the point of sociability doesn't arise. So number one is the correct option. I just made this answer, figured out this answer from the first paragraph, which says that self-control is thought to be the cornerstone of intelligence, as it is an important requisite for complex decision-making and planning for the future, says Snell. So when he says that, so you cannot infer this, cuttlefish exercise choice when it comes to food. Yeah, that's correct. Like human children, cuttlefish are capable of self-control. Okay. Cuttlefish exert self-control with the help of diversions, that is distraction. So that is correct. Now let's come to the next passage. And in this passage, he talks about utopia and dystopia. What is utopia? Utopia is a state, where everything is fine, pleasant, fantastic, everything is to your, what you call, needs and desires. And dystopia is just the opposite. Dystopia is a catastrophe, it's just the opposite. So the point that he tries to make in this is, in the first paragraph, what he has taken up is, in Moore's time, that is the name of the writer. What does it mean in Moore's time? It's going back to the past. That is, we cannot travel outside our neighborhood without passport. We must wear the same plain clothes. We must exchange our houses every 10 years. We cannot avoid labor. We all go to bed at the same time. We have religious freedom. All these things, once upon a time, all these restrictions, all these restraints, you see, they were a part of the utopia in the past, and they were very happy about. See what he says here: in most time, for much of the population, given the plenty and security on offer, such restraints would not have been overtly unreasonable. That is, they were just reasonable. But for the modern people, the same utopia of the past, you see, becomes dystopia. Dangerously dystopia, you see. What was, you see, pleasant in the past becomes unpleasant, is treated unpleasant in the present. So that is the point he tries to make in the first paragraph. In the second paragraph, he is elaborating on the utopian concept, and he tells us that the characteristics of utopia. He talks about the further concept of utopia. But the main argument that he's giving is, you see, what was considered to be good, what was considered to be pleasant, what was considered to be utopian, what was considered to be restrained in the past. With all these restrictions, it was a fine time, it was a fine period. But if you were to bring all these things into the present, and if the young people are asked to go by that, then it won't be utopia, it would be dystopia, right? So that is the point he's been extending. The second paragraph also, he's carrying on with this point. In the last paragraph, he tries to give you a kind of argument. And what is the argument? The argument is, he says utopia and dystopia are similar. And why are they similar? Because what was once utopia is now dystopia. The utopia of one time is the dystopia of the present time. Try to understand this point, because whatever things were considered good in the past may not be, you see, by today's standards good. The young may not like those things, so it becomes a dystopia. You see, all those restrictions we had in our past: you are supposed to pay attention in class, you're not supposed to talk, you're supposed to stand this way, sit this way, you're supposed to wear these clothes, on Sundays you're supposed to do this, on Mondays you're supposed to do that. People were happy with all these things in the past, but now if the same things were introduced in the present would perhaps become miserable, and it would become a dystopia. So that is what he says. But then at the same time, he also gives an argument that all utopia, you see, they can't, you see, all utopias definitely don't change into dystopia. There may be exceptions, you see, and that is how he ends the passage. So now let's come to the questions here. Which sequence of words below best captures the narrative of the passage? So you can see for yourself, that is number 3 contains everything: utopia, security, homogeneity, intentional community. Okay. For instance, number 2 leaves out security, and number 1, you see, leaves out security and talks about curtailment of privacy. And last one, you see, is coercion. It doesn't talk about homogeneity. So the available options, number 3 is the best option. Okay. All of the following statements can be inferred from the passage, except that it means that you can infer 3 statements, but you cannot infer one. That is an exception. Many conceptions of utopian societies emphasize the importance of social uniformity and cultural homogeneity. That's correct. Utopian and dystopian societies are twins, the progeny of the same parents. No, you can't infer this. You can't say that they are the progeny of the same parents. No, that's wrong. So number 2 is the correct option. Number 2. It is possible to see utopias as dystopias with a change in perspective, because one person's utopia could be seen as another's dystopia. That is, one man's poison, what you call nectar, is another man's poison. You see, one man's medicine could be another man's poison. It's that kind of an argument. So here, of course, number 2 is the correct option. And then you have, you see, utopian societies exist in a long tradition of literature dealing with imaginary people practicing imaginary customs in imaginary worlds. Yes, that is correct. I mean, number 4 is correct. It can be inferred, because utopia is basically, you see, imaginary, you see, an imagined world, you see, where everything is fine. Now let's look at the next question. Following from the passage, which one of the following may be seen as a characteristic of a utopian society? Yes. Which one is a characteristic? A society without any laws to restrain one's individuality? No. That cannot be, because in a utopian society there are restraints. That's what he says. The regulation of homogeneity through promoting competitive heterogeneity. No, it doesn't talk about that. Institutional surveillance of every individual to ensure his her security and welfare. I think he has talked about that in the first or second paragraph, and that is the answer, number 3. A society where public power is earned through merit rather than through privilege. No. So that is 3 is the correct option. Next question. All of the following arguments are made in the passage except that. Let's see which argument hasn't been made in the passage out of these 4. In most time, there was plenty and security, so people did not need restraints that could appear unreasonable. You see, this is an exception. This is an exception because he says that they had restraints, right? And they were quite reasonable also. So number 1 is the correct option. The other 3, you see, they aren't, because they are somehow part of the argument in the passage. Now, let us go to the next question. A popular response is the exhortation to plant more trees. So, number 1 cannot be the first sentence because we don't know what it is a popular response to what. Burning them releases it. Number 3, burning what? So, we cannot have 3 as the first sentence. And this is because this is what we don't know. There is no antecedent. So, in the available cluster, 2 should be the first sentence. It seems all but certain that global warming will go well about 2 degrees, quite how high no one knows yet. So, in order to contradict this, in order to counter this, what do? Popular exhortation, popular response is exhortation to plant more trees. In order to fight global warming, what you do is number 1, that is planting more trees. And this is because planting trees, if you do that, this is because trees sequester carbon by absorbing carbon dioxide. So 2, 1, 4, and finally 3, burning them releases it. So the correct answer is 2, 1, 4, 3. Let's come to the next jumbled cluster. The work is more than the text. For the text, so we don't know what work is he talking about. So 1 cannot be the correct option, right? We don't know what work is he talking about. The convergence of text and readers bring the literary work into existence, and this conversion is not to be identified either with reality of the text or with the individual disposition. The text, what text is he talking about? Because when you go through the other 2, you'll find there is a mention of certain text. So number 2 cannot be the first sentence. From this polarity, which polarity we don't know. So number 3 cannot be the first sentence. The first sentence is of course number 4, that is the literary work. The literary work has what you call 2 poles, which you might call the artistic and the aesthetic. The artistic refers to the text created by the author, and the aesthetic to the realization accomplished by the reader. So it is, you see, an activity by the reader and the writer, you see, the writer and the reader. Now, when he talks about, you see, the creation of the author and the realization, you see, by the reader, a polarity is established. You see, the polarity is between the author and the reader. So number 3 should follow number 4. From this polarity, it follows that the literary work cannot be completely identical. See, there is a mention of the literary work, which is already mentioned in number 4. Okay, it is 4, 3, and then you come to number 1. The work is more than the text. And then the last number 2. So the correct option is 4, 3, 1, 2. Now here you have what you call 5 jumbled up sentences about a single topic. 4 of them can be put together to form a coherent paragraph. There is one sentence which cannot fit into the scheme. So we find out that sentence. That is C. The legal status of resources mined in space remains ambiguous, and while the market for asteroid minerals is currently not in existence, this is likely to change as technical hurdles diminish. Outer space is a common, and all of it is open for exploration. So look, in the first line, he talks about what you call the market for asteroids and resources mined in the space. The second, he talks about the outer space and the space law developed in the 15th and 60s. And he has already talked about the legal status in number 1. In number 2, he talks about the space law. Number 3, laws adopted by the US and Luxembourg are first steps, and he's talking about the laws. Critics say that US conferring rights that it has no authority to confer. Russia in particular was condemned. This citing the US disrespect for international law. So he's talking about the legal status, and he's talking about what you call the laws. At issue now is commercial activity as private firms rather than nation state look to space for profit. So you can see 1, 2, 3, and 5, they talk about space. It's only what you call number 4, which talks about the international law. This has nothing to do with what you call conferring rights and you see citing US disrespect for international law. So number 4 is the correct option here. Let's look into the next one. And he says here there's a dark side to academic research, especially in India, and its center is the phenomenon of predatory journals. But in truth, as long as you pay, you can get anything published. In look and feel, thus, they are exactly like any reputed journal. Okay, they claim to be indexed in the most influential databases, say they possess editorial boards that comprise top scientists and researchers, and claim to have a rigorous peer review structure. Okay, but a large section of researchers and scientists across the world are at the receiving end of nothing short of an academic publishing scam. Now, number 5 seems to be out of sync, you see. Number 5 is the option because the other 4 talk about the journals, you see, and the reputation of journals, and you pay and you get things published, you see. But the last one is a little different, you see. Across the world are at the receiving end of nothing short of an academic publishing scam. He's not talking about the publishing scam here. He's talking about getting articles published in journals, even if you had to pay for them. So number 5 is the correct option. Let's come to the next question. Look at the passage. He says foreign peacekeepers often exist in a bubble in the poor countries in which they are deployed. They live in posh compounds, drive fancy vehicles, and distance themselves from locals. This may be partially justified as they are outsiders living in constant fear, performing a job that is emotionally draining. But they are often despised by the locals, and many would like them to leave. A better solution would be bottom up peace building, which would involve their spending more time working with communities, understanding their grievances, and earning their trust rather than only meeting government officials. The peacekeeping forces, you see, that's what he's talking about. And the main point you can follow this is what he's saying is that there is close contact with the ordinary people instead of only with the government officials would definitely help the foreign peacekeepers, you see, have a better time than what they're having now. Okay, now let's see that. The environment in poor countries has tended to make foreign peacekeeping forces live in enclaves, but it is time to change the scenario. He says it is time to change the scenarios, but he doesn't tell us what is the change. Okay, so number 1 is not a very good summary. Extravagant lifestyles and an aloof attitude among the foreigners working as peacekeepers in Bukar had justifiably made them the target of local anger. There is only one point that is covered here. He doesn't cover the other point by saying that how can they live better that by connecting with the common people. So number 2 cannot be the correct answer. A better summary would be peacekeeping forces in foreign countries have tended to be aloof for valid reasons, but would be more effective if they work more closely with local communities. That is the best summary we have here, right? And the last one you see is exactly the reverse of the passage. He says peacekeeping duties would be more effectively performed by local residents, given their better understanding, knowledge, and rapport with their own communities. He doesn't talk about the foreign peacekeepers, and which is a very important point. So number 3 is the correct option. Let's come to the next question. McGurk and MacDonald reported a powerful multisensory illusion occurring with audiovisual speech. They recorded a voice articulating a consonant ba, 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 and dubbed it with a face articulating another consonant ga, ga, ga. Even though the acoustic speech signal was well recognized alone, it was heard as another consonant after dubbing with incongruent visual speech, that is da, da, da. Okay, so now you can see that what was the auditory speech and what was the reception or the perception. You see, at first it was ba, 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 and then you see another consonant ga, 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 and then when there was some miss what you call match, and it was perceived or heard as da 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 instead of ga ga ga. So the point you see that is trying to say, the illusion termed as McGurk effect has been replicated many times. That has sparked an abundance of research. The reason for the great impact is that this is a striking demonstration of multi-sensory integration, where that auditory and visual information is merged into a unified integrated. So now let's see which one of the following gives you the best summary. Number one, visual speech mismatched with auditory speech can result in the perception of an entirely different message. This illusion is known as the McGurk effect. This is the best essence. This is the best summary you see. Number one is the best summary because it gives you all the points. The second one says the McGurk effect, which is a demonstration of has been replicated. It only takes 1 point. It doesn't talk about the visual speech mismatch with the auditory. When the auditory speech signal does not match the visual speech movements, the acoustic speech signal is confusing and the integration of the two is imperfect. Now, this doesn't talk about the McGurk effect, you see, because the McGurk effect is important. It doesn't mention this. And the last one you see is the same. It doesn't mention this, what you call McGurk effect. So the number one you see is the best option. Let's take up the next question. And here he says, developing countries are becoming hotbeds of business innovation in much the same way as Japan did from the 1950s onwards. They are reinventing systems of production and distribution and experimenting with entirely new business models. Why are countries that were until recently associated with cheap hands now becoming leaders in innovation? Driven by a mixture of ambition and fear, they are relentlessly climbing up the value chain. Emerging market or champions have not only proved highly competitive in their own backyards, they are also going global themselves. So let us look at these summaries now. Competition has driven emerging economies, once suppliers of cheap labor, to become innovators of business models that have enabled them to move up the value chain and go. Developing countries are being forced to invent new business models. No, this doesn't have contain the whole point about competitiveness and other things. Number three and four suffer from the same problem, that they omit the idea of competition, which is important. Okay, it's only number one that this idea has been taken up. So number one is the best summary available. The last one, in the central nervous system of other animal species, such a comprehensive regeneration of neurons has not yet been proven beyond doubt. Now, such a comprehensive regeneration, other animal species. So, something has already been talked about. So, number one cannot be the first sentence when he says such a comprehensive regeneration. Now, neurons, that is, he has talked about it in a previous sentence. Number three cannot be this first sentence because it says they studied and we don't know who studied. And number four cannot be the first sentence. However, their ability, we don't know whose ability. So the first sentence in this is number two. Biologists from the University of Beirut have discovered a uniquely rapid form of regeneration in injured neurons and their function in the central nervous system of zebrafish. Okay, after two, you have three. They studied, they refers to the biologists. They studied the Mothma cells, which are solely responsible for the escape behavior of the fish and previously regarded as incapable of regeneration. Incapable of regeneration. However, their ability to regenerate crucially depends on the location of the injury. Their ability to so three and four are connected. So after three, you must have four, and after four, it is number one. So the final answer is 2, 3, 4, 1.